What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. Today, we welcome along another member of the GSA family, the current head of movement at the school, Miss Rachel Birch-Lawson. Did I get that right?
You did.
Wonderful. Yes. Again, I should have checked before I came on. I always do
That's
that.
fine.
Cool. Anyway, so let's take a moment to introduce Rachel. For any GSA alumni or current students coming on, you're already familiar with Rachel's work, but I'm just going to remind you again of that anyway. So, Rachel trained at the London Contemporary Dance School, graduating in 2006, and in 2009 was selected for a unique choreographic program, Dance Beyond Borders, which took her to Germany, Belgium, and Portugal, as well as around the UK. In 2015, she was awarded an Independent Artist Award to attend the Core Leadership Program Emerging Leaders course. That's a bit of a mouthful. Currently, the head of movement at GSA. She holds an MFA in Choreography at Trinity Laban, Fellow of the Higher Education Academy, Associate of the Institute for Leadership of Management, and the Consent Forward Artist certified by the IDC. Her work has some of the work she's produced for major venues to small scale, rural touring in village halls, black boxes, unconventional spaces. She's collaborated with the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, and the British Youth Music Theatre, based here in the UK. And in her words, making dance is her way of changing her small corner of the world, bringing people together to explore, inquire, expand our ideas, and sharing her love of movement and its power to communicate with as many people as possible. So that's just a small sample of Rebecca's work. So without further ado, hello, Rachel.
Hiya. And I should say, I think actually also that little quote from me about dance is slightly old now because it probably comes from the period of time when I was working predominantly in dance. And I now would just add dance and movement because that is where I work now, almost exclusively in the field of movement. So I think at the time when I wrote that a long time ago, I probably didn't really know that movement existed, and I
Yeah.
didn't know that it was a thing. So.
Yeah. Does it still speak to your practice now,
Oh
though?
yeah, absolutely. I think the same thing. I guess maybe, moving the body would be what I'd maybe say now.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting conversation there, isn't it? Where does dance and movement begin? That's a whole kind of
Oh,
interesting, useful, thoughtful conversation, but maybe not for today.
we could touch on that though. That's a really great question, but we'll see if time permits us towards the end. Cool. So, Rachel, thank you for being here today. But so we start at the beginning for every guest. Where did it all come from? The love of movement. Where did it start for you?
Um, well, I grew up doing dancing, my ballet, jazz, Spanish dancing, all that stuff, probably like a lot of little girls. And I always liked it, but actually I remember, and I was, fairly good at it, hopefully. Um, but actually I was lucky when I was 15 to do work experience in a dance company, in Rombe dance company in the wardrobe. And I remember being there and thinking, oh, these are my people. I do like performing, I do like moving my body, but actually this environment, and I mean not just the performers, the dancers, but the wardrobe team, the production staff, the admin staff, these are my people, and this is the kind of community I want to spend my time in, I want to invest in. So because again, I didn't know much about anything else, and I'd never done any acting or musical theatre myself, I went down the dance route and I went to dance school. And again, I remember going to dance school and I'm like, oh yes, these are definitely my people, even more so. And then when I graduated and started working, so my first job, actually, my first choreography job was choreographing an opera, and it was with non-dancers. And I was like, oh, these are even more my people. So it's kind of a sort of journey of realizing that it was the performing arts community and people in a space making stuff, with movement being part of that ingredient, something really special about a bunch of people moving their bodies together in a space. And interestingly, actually more exciting when it's people who aren't necessarily trained in a specific style or genre of movement, i.e. dance. And I just think there's kind of an alchemy there that I absolutely love. And so from then on, it was quite clear that I just wanted to find ways to be in rooms where that kind of stuff was happening. And
Mm.
whether that's professional actors or dancers, whether that's vocational students, whether that's actually young people. And over time, through doing work with opera companies, musical theatre, and then with actors, I began to realize there was a thing called movement that wasn't the dance styles I knew, which was predominantly contemporary dance, and sort of beginning to adapt my practice and learn more about that and
Mm.
discover that I think I liked that maybe slightly more. Again, maybe the people I liked more were the people who I love working with dancers, but actually I think there's something really special about working with actors that maybe go, yeah, maybe this is where maybe these really are my people. I think I finally ended up with the people that I was looking for.
Yeah. Or what is it about actors that sort of separates them from everybody else that you've worked with?
Um, well, this is a massive generalization. As soon as I'm thinking, I can think of 1,000 exceptions to this. But I think there's something about the actor's process, which I find really interesting, the way that an actor thinks. Um, I think I'm not really interested in codified styles of dance anyway. So that was always out the window for me. I just wasn't interested in sort of genre specific work. So there's that. I find something really amazing and delightful and lovely about watching someone discover what their body's capable of, whether that's a highly virtuosic physicality or just the sort of detail and specificity and sort of getting to know their body. And I think that's something that actors do, maybe in a way that dancers who've been dancing for 20 years don't have that discovery process. And of course, it's just amazing working with really great texts. My other passion is reading, writing, and academia as well. I am an academic technically, and I think I really enjoy the kind of discussion and digging into a text that you get with a director and with an actor, which is just not part necessarily of a more traditional dance choreographic process. I actually think what's nice is that actors bring they bring both a sort of maturity in their thinking. This is my personal experience, of course, no disrespect to dancers or actors out there who work
No, no,
differently,
not at all, not at all.
but they bring a certain kind of maturity in the inquiry, but also kind of a lovely, delightful kind of naivety in the discovery. And
Mm.
that's a really nice balance to be working with, where the conversation's really rich, but it's like watching someone discover something, even a highly skilled actor mover, of course, but it still feels like there's something about there's a joy in discovery that maybe I think, of course, if you've been doing something for a long time as a dancer, for example, maybe isn't there in the same way. But as I'm thinking, don't come for me because I can imagine lots of dancers going, that's our process too. So maybe that's just my experience.
Yeah. Please share as much of your experience. So the one word you mentioned there was alchemy, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not quite entirely sure what that means because people say, "Oh, like it's like alchemy," or "alchemy is like generated in the room," or stuff like that. Through a movement lens, when you talk about alchemy, what does that actually mean?
Um, I think there's just something really interesting when something becomes great in the sum of its parts. And that's obviously the collaborative process with the director and you and other members of the creative team and the actors. And you're sort of putting together these, all of us own or know. When I say own, I mean more like know our little parts of the puzzle, then suddenly it clicks into place and something greater than that is made. And the sort of moment when it comes to life and you go, that's exactly what I meant, but somehow more than I meant. Um, but also there's something about I had a moment, I was in the rehearsal room yesterday or the day before, and we were working on something and we had this sort of set piece and it was fine, but it wasn't it. And I was like, okay, well, let's just carry on because maybe we just block through it and get out the other side and then we can refresh it. And then, you sort of have a slightly random thought. You say, oh, try it like this, or, have this thought.
Yeah,
And suddenly you go, oh, that's it. That's it. That's amazing. I
yeah,
don't, that was the most random sort of from nowhere thought, and it's transformed the moment. So I think there's something about that, and then everyone can feel it. The actors can feel it, the director can feel it, I can feel it, that something's kind of just almost clicked into place. And yeah, it's greater than all the little ingredients we've given it. I mean, that's just really, really exciting. And I think as a movement tutor, not just a movement director, I do a lot of work with the first year actors, first year applied and contemporary, first year actor musos, um, and just introducing people to this world who've either come in going, I don't move, don't ask me to. This is scary. Or I've got lots and lots of dance training, show me what to do. One or the other sort of tends to be, I'm being reductive. You tend to get one or two versions and kind of being able to introduce them to this world of being with their body, looking after their body, connecting with their body, finding a movement studio a safe, enjoyable place to be, kind of that. Like that's quite a magical thing. And maybe going from start of the first year, everyone's a little bit frightened of this thing and possibly of me, to suddenly being, we are at the end, we're at the summer term now, and everyone being kind of like coming in, being like, this is a good thing and this is a good place to be. And I think that's a little bit of magic too that movement can do. Which is why one of the reasons why I like teaching almost sometimes as much as movement directing, possibly more than at times, because you get to see that journey, and that's in its own kind of magic.
yeah. That's a good word, journey. I think that's fluttered around a lot at GSA actually, whether you're 3 years or just 1 year or 2 years, in fact. Um, I wonder, one question I have for today was, particularly like you mentioned there, someone coming in and being a bit unsure of movement at first or unsure of expressing themselves. I don't, in your career, working with not only with students or like children, like with a youth music theatre or anything, or even adults, have you ever had someone come up to you and just go, "Yeah, yeah, Rachel, movement, it's just not really my thing." So how do you
Yeah,
respond
I
to
mean, I
that?
think if I had a penny for every time that happened,
Yeah,
what I do like, and coming back to what I like about actors, I think actors tend to be, this is generalization, but tend to be quite open-minded.
yeah,
I mean, part of the training is that actors are usually quite good at throwing themselves and go at the thing. So I don't often find I'm met with resistance in that way. I'm met with discomfort and fear. And I think there's something really interesting about thinking that whatever process you are facilitating this is a sort of academic, teachers speak, but a learning journey, for
mm,
everybody and for me. And there's something about sort of something, movement by stealth or choreography by stealth or whatever. It's sort of it's about how you navigate people into a place where they feel safe to do
mm,
whatever work you need them to do, and that's about introducing it, ideas, thoughts, exercises, techniques incrementally and over time. It's about meeting people with where they are, particularly as a student. Let's take that as a sort of key example, because we don't have an end product we're trying to get to. There's a premiere on a certain date. We're just working over, hopefully, term, weeks, months, maybe years. We have time, to let them meet the work where they are and go at their own pace. And I think our students are quite good at self-motivating and challenging themselves. So I never really feel like I'm having to drag someone along. It's often more saying, give yourself some grace.
yeah,
It's hard. And also, it's really acknowledging that people do come to this work with their own lived experiences. And there's an odd assumption, I think, that, a movement studio is a neutral place. I mean, also, as you know, at GSA, they're actually the dance studios. There's bars and mirrors. We're trying to cover them up, but they're there. And that's, a lot of us come with our own trauma from that, using trauma slightly lightly there, I realize. But also lots of other lived experiences that may mean that this is at best a foreign or alien world, and at worst maybe a dangerous world. And there's me in my bare feet going, "Come on, everyone, feel your body, move around." That's not where someone's at. So there's definitely something about scaffolding that, layering it in, introducing things gently and calmly. And if we're under the time crunch of a rehearsal process, it's still going slow to go fast. It's still laying those foundations. Obviously, there is a point when you need to go like, this needs to happen. And hopefully if someone's been cast into a role and a certain kind of process, they know what they're signing up for, and they're ready for it. But you still need to sort of support that journey. And it's amazing what can trigger insecurity in movement. Suddenly someone will suddenly have to confront a past injury or a sort of part of their sense of their self that feels alien or unfamiliar or threatening. I'm thinking of an example where someone was having to play as part of a cheerleader, and so their mind went to the sort of connotations that being quite sexy and quite cool, and they were like, "And that's not me." There was that barrier went up, and just having to work with them to go, first of all, let's unpick what we mean by cheerleader. Let's find the codes of that don't require you having to be these things that you don't feel you are. Let's find the physical language, the technique of that, and also let's just coax you out of that slight block you've got into where you've frozen up with fear,
mm,
and bring you back to a place where you're able to work. So yeah.
yeah. I remember speaking to, I had a few people on talking about movement, and one person in particular said that, about, you mentioned there about some of the reactions that you get from people. And one lady I had on said, so what's like some of the most memorable moments where you got such a genuine, visceral reaction, like during a intense scene or intense exercise? And she said, no, actually, I just got everybody up. It was the start of the class. I just told them to breathe in, out, go all the way through their body, connect with every fiber of your being, plant your feet in the ground, roots going all the way down to the center of the earth. And this one girl just went to pieces,
Mm.
just by breathing and just by movement in a way, and just allowing that power and that present. And a big word I think in movement is presence, and being present to just enjoy the moment and also feel it in your body in a way. And just that breathing is enough for some people to go, "Oh wow, there's some stuff
Yeah.
in me here that I'm looking at here." Have you ever had some similar experiences? Obviously, you don't have to name names, by the
No,
way.
of course.
But
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think all probably movement directors and movement teachers have got those. I'm sure a lot. I mean, I think voice often has a similar kind of journey
oh
because
yeah, 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 yeah.
and acting sort of fundamentals, tutors of those early classes. Um, yeah, I think for a lot of people, the most threatening thing, a lot of students, the most threatening thing is to confront your actual self. The characters are fine. Interestingly, I've had a conversation recently with a student about, they were saying that in the first year, our students do contact improvisation. In the second year, they start to study sort of practices and support around intimacy. And they were saying the intimacy is fine. Like when I'm a character, it's a scene, I can do that. When it's me engaging in the touch, in the contact work, even though there's no sexualized connotation to that, for a lot of people, that's a safer process. Therefore, for her, this particular student, that's more confronting because it really is myself, and I don't have that other scaffolding and support. Yeah, I think well, touch is a thing that can often trigger, quite understandably, levels of discomfort, fear, all kinds of things. But I think what movement training does do is, of course, we're offering tools and techniques that people can use to create character and things, but there's the sort of other work, which is actually the self, the ease in your body, the ability to connect with the body, to be aware. And again, that thing of that, making that safe for students, making that something that becomes enjoyable, rediscovering every week when you come back to class where your body's at, rather than being annoyed and frustrated by it changing or shifting, or why is it not like it was last week, or why, but actually sort of being philosophically being okay with where you are each day. And I would agree, it's breathing, it's grounding. Those are things that are both threatening, but also are, in my opinion, the tools that support us out of those stages. If they can become useful tools for an actor or a student actor.
Yeah, I think movement also it plays on the imagination a lot of the time as well, because not only just finding the physical body, but your subconscious, or your ability to see things. And because a lot of work I did was ties in with Jack Lecoq in a way. And the art of like seeing things. Say there's an apple in your hand. Obviously there isn't one, but you feel the weight of it, and then it can't just be an apple. Maybe it's a toolbox, and you're trying to pick this up, and this thing's so freaking heavy. But your body, your movement has to indicate that, and you have to feel it within that body, and that encourages the imagination to kind of take hold as well. So, where do you stand on? I would imagine imagination is a huge part of your practice as well.
Absolutely. But I think that's interesting as well, going back to what we were saying about the other things. I also think that what I'm quite passionate about is these things are techniques. They're techniques we can develop, and also in order to support the individual, they can fall back upon the technical skill. And by technique, I mean also a technique is also the ability to connect mind and body, the ability to ignite the imagination. I don't mean technique like sort of the ability to do things. I mean the ability to work in an effective way.
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree, and I think the imagination is a huge part of it, and learning to sort of unlock the imagination or connect the imagination to your physicality is a practice that we can study and we can get better at. And I think something that I'm really interested in as well is a lot of my sort of entrance into actor movement was actually through doing something called action theatre, which is not very well known in the UK, but was sort of my first foray outside of the world of dance when I was in my early 20s. And so going, well, there's this other thing where you do text and moving and sounding, and that's a different practice. But a lot of that comes from, the idea that you can have the thought and let the thought lead the body, or you can let the body move and let that lead the thought. So there's a sort of thing there about becoming aware of the intelligence in our bodies as we're moving, and the ability therefore to notice, respond, and let that further, almost like this lovely reciprocal loop. Thought leaves action, action then generates new thoughts, and it becomes a self-fulfilling sort of cyclical thing. And I think, again, and that's a technique, that I work on with our students, which is to be able to sort of tap into that loop and say yes to that loop, and be able to physicalize those thoughts effectively, whether that's in the texture of the body, or whether that's in the action, or whether it's at the scale, but also be able to kind of notice what they are doing, so they can then use that to develop their imaginative landscape. So again, I absolutely agree. I think those things are super important, and they are and they're supported by practice and technique, which sort of sounds funny. Sometimes I think people must look through the door of a movement teacher's studio and go, what is the work in here? What is the work? Like, everyone's pretending to be an animal. Everyone's pretending to be, an animal over there, or, look through this room and everyone's lying on the floor breathing. What is the work? And you go, well, actually the work's, it's hard to pinpoint, but I think, it sounds maybe a little bit like a cop out, but it when you see it, and it when you do it. maybe it's not always easy to, some of the students say, what's this exercise for? And I say, you tell me, you know, that really annoying teacher thing, if you tell me, but you know, you tell me. Like, and I know it must be infuriating. I think, just give me the answer, but you go, well, I have my answer,
Yeah.
but I want to know your answer, because actually for one student, it may be, as you've said, actually, I'm just working with the fact that, noticing that as I stand and as I breathe, I'm actually feeling a lot of emotions, and the actor self is getting in the way of the character I'm trying to investigate. So let me just notice that. And someone else might be going, great, I'm going straight into the work of character, and I'm there already. So yeah, it's interesting how we can have plans for what we're trying to teach or deliver, and then the actor takes it off in their own way.
Yeah.
Better or for worse.
Yeah. It's a very individual relationship, I think, with every performer. Everything's different. Like your relationship with movement is different to other movement directors. You know, everyone has a unique journey. Just very quick before I get to the next question, you know, something you brought up there. I imagine well, there was one day when I was there, we were all, I think, I'm not, we were definitely in a movement class or something, or a voice class, and we're making all these weird noises, and we're like contorting our bodies to move in all these different shapes and stuff. And someone just said, "Can you imagine if our parents walked in right now and they would just went, yeah, you know, what are you spending all this money on a drama school?" And they walk in and they are seeing doing all these scales and pretending to be like a cat on the floor, and the people are going, I can't imagine what their reaction would be. But we all just found it quite funny, really.
But
But
I mean, I was going to say, I agree. I know you. I know you want to come to the next question, but you know, I was I've just done a load of animal studies. Just this time of year, I do animal studies with various groups, and I always sort of sit them down and say, like, you know, what's your first reaction? And quite often they're like, oh, it's the cliche of drama school, and I'm like, yeah, and for good reason, because it's actually really, really good piece of work. It's like, but also let's just take all the fact that it's valuable to one side.
yeah,
If you told me when I was 5 years old that this could be work, that we'd get to run around and pretend to be cats, and that's work, how happy would I have been? You know, never mind the fact that it's actually super
overjoyed.
useful. And, you know, exactly. So we can still also embrace the fact that our jobs involve all this fantastic, playful stuff that a lot of adults don't get to do, which doesn't undermine the fact that we're taking it super seriously and understanding exactly what we're getting from it. But let's also have a healthy sense of the humor of this moment. We are all pretending to be animals in the space, and isn't that joyful?
Yeah,
You know, so I think I agree basically.
yeah. Actually, that's a good point. Actually, I haven't talked about animal studies on this show very much, but it's something that really fascinates me because I've heard stories. I think one famous one, I think, was Anthony Hopkins did. He based Hannibal Lecter on a tarantula or something like
Wow.
that. And so, like that, you know, I don't really like spiders, but just I'm going to face my fears now. But so as you can, I've watched a few documentaries. Ugh. Anyway, so the tarantula has this kind of quality where it's very still and it's very, you know, it's got eight eyes that can just stare at you. And much like a crocodile, you know, it has a very good ability just to be still. And at any moment, it can just shoot at you 100 miles an hour, and that's it. You're dead. You're done for.
Yeah.
But when you see that incorporated in Hannibal Lecter, I'm like, oh, okay, I see that. And how other people have used animal studies, people have used, I don't know, birds, people have used like sharks or whatever it is. It helps them build their character. So talk a little bit about animal studies and how you like to use that.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's always when I get my imposter syndrome on, I sort of go, who am I to speak about these established practices? And of course, I think that's a common thing probably in the arts, a little bit of the imposter syndrome. I have
Yeah,
my personal perspective,
yeah,
but I'm sure there's lots of people who have much more information than me to share. My personal perspective as well as a teacher,
mm,
a unit rather as a movement director in a process is I really love the two parts it offers, which is the ability for complete transformation. And this is why I think even as a movement practitioner, I carry maybe some of the productive part of the discipline of dance. I'm like, I want to see the animal. I want to see a penguin walk through the space. And you know,
mm.
I don't want to see an actor pretend. I want to believe, you know. And I really enjoy that with the actors when you really see them, they've kind of really studied some kind of moment. There was a fantastic one, somebody did some kind of springbok kind of animal, I can't remember what it was, but it does this crazy big leap, and they spent weeks working on this moment of leap, which is not something they were going to do on stage, but they wanted to master this moment when the animal can just leap because they wanted to capture that feeling. And I find that really, really exciting because I think, well, the art of transformation is super important. Of course, it is physical transformation. I mean, you know, that is a really key part of acting practice. And there's something about being able to be aware enough of your body to know when you've achieved that obviously within the limits of the human body, and sometimes animal studies can actually be a bit demoralizing for students because they go, oh, I can't fly and I can't swing and I can't swim, and all I realize is I can't go as fast as a cheetah or as or as slow as a chameleon. Like how sort of exasperating is that?
Yeah, I've only got two legs.
Yeah, exactly. And my wrists really hurt if I spend too long on my
Yeah.
But I also think that it does offer, as you say, that sort of access to another way of thinking. So I love the mindset work in animal studies. I love that sort of, I feel like it offers something about that immediacy of impulse and action for a student actor. The animal has the thought and acts on it. It doesn't go, oh, would that be social? I mean, of course, the animals have their social conventions, but there's sort of the barriers that we have as humans. And there's something, again, really liberating safely. And I always make sure that the boundaries of safety are super clear for everyone about what's allowed and what's appropriate, and how we might step out if work gets too much, or all those sorts of things, but safely be able to have an impulse and just try and get to the place where you act on that impulse rather than sort of having that delay, that sort of time delay. And I think that's what animal studies I perceive can really do for students. Yeah, that transformation, that connection to impulse action. And then of course all the lovely work that starts to come as you move it into the character work around sort of, as you say, making those choices, being able to work with maybe qualities that seem, especially for a student actor, they often sort of get what feels quite extreme. It's like, well, let's work with the extreme. Let's embrace what this work offers of maybe working with those more heightened qualities. You can always tone it down, but especially in training, this is the time to find the edges of things, not the time to play small. You can make considered choices later, but at the beginning, let's find the extremes of speed, or the extremes of, as you said, stillness and then action, or whatever. So yeah, I have to say, I mean, it's something that I was quite resistant to when I first encountered it, because it was a bit this sort of like, oh, this makes me feel quite uncomfortable. Maybe it feels a little bit silly. And actually over time, really over the years, kind of getting more and more excited by it as something. And our actors do it for a term, different parts of the training, but it's amazing how many of our third years go, oh, I've done the animal studies prep. Like that animal work was something I now put into all my characters. I find it really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And even really simple things like we had, sorry, I know I'm getting too excited, but we had some.
No, please.
And we had a great second year thing when they were doing a Greek play, and they'd all chosen big cats. It was a room of big cats all prowling around. Everyone's an alpha, and then two deer looking terrified. I won't name the play, but can you imagine the world of a sort of a Greek play? Oh, yeah. And actually getting the actors to do the text from all fours, it's really muscular text, and it's text where the stakes are high in every scene. Every single scene is about war and revenge. Every scene is at that level. And how do they find that kind of muscularity and power? And actually getting them to do it from the animal body and to be prowling and to be on all fours, it kind of anchored the thought and the voice and the body really effectively, and kind of gave them that sensation that they needed when they brought it onto two legs. It had sort of in my opinion, I'm not an acting director or an acting tutor, but it felt like it had transformed their relationship to their text. Yeah. Even though actually not a lot of the physical traits of the animal stayed, but something about that process had unlocked something for them.
Yeah, it's almost like you go to like extremes, like you were an extreme cat, or you were an extreme badger or cow or spider, whatever it is, but you're an extreme version of that. Even like a cat would look at you being an extreme cat, and they'll go, I don't behave like that. What the hell are you doing? But from that extreme, once you get that in your body, and then it's almost like then you can sort of condense it down into the human essence of it as well. But the animal, like you say, still remains. So you still get those qualities. Like it just could be like a little flick of the finger, or a rapid eye movement or something. Just something that keeps the animal there, and people will pick up on that and the subtlety of it as well. Is that part of the process particularly when it comes to showtime, especially?
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to condense down to a place that's appropriate for the character, for the style of, that's the thing I always say to students is, watch style of, when they first work with animal studies and they're working without a specific play in mind, where they're just exploring an animal, at least, in the way that I do it with them. I always say, but why are we, we don't have to assume it's naturalism that we're ending with. Yeah. Maybe we are, in which case, absolutely. And there's something great about seeing the actors then start to make their choices with the work, and to sort of bring their skills from other classes together with that work to be considered and thoughtful, and sort of be aware of the impact of their actions. I personally am quite a big advocate of like, I really like, again, we're talking about in a classroom training process here over multiple years, not in a rehearsal process, but to an essence, to an extent within a rehearsal process too. I really like people to find the edges of things. So I like people to find not when I say extremes, I don't mean sort of necessarily emotionally expressive. I just mean scale. So I mean, also very small, also very quiet. It's not all big and loud, but to find really to push the it's like I was saying, it's like you've got to play up and down the scales. You've got to keep going to the top of the range and the bottom range, and you've got to keep pushing that so that your range gradually expands and your ability to play up and down that expands. And then, of course, as an actor, we condense, but you might condense one end or the other of that scale, depending on the style of production, the kind of character you're playing, the vision of the director, etc. But I guess maybe that's also where the thing that you mentioned really early on about me sort of wanting to spread some of the joy of moving. Like for me, there's a lot of fun to be had in that, and I don't want to imply that we don't take it seriously, but I think there's a huge amount of learning that's gained by having a lot of fun. In a studio, in a way. One of my first years said, the second years were saying to us, you do the weirdest things in Rachel's class, but she's like really strict about them. And I was like, yes. It's weird. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one. Lots of our tutors are doing that.
No, definitely
I'm
not
not the first movement person who's doing that. But that thing of like find the extreme, because this is the safe space. And no one's judging or acting in this room. So this is the place to try things and be like, oh, that was a bit too much, or this is the place because we're not going towards any specific end goal. There's no production on the horizon. This is the place to explore and discover parts of your body, yourself, your identity, and your capacity as an actor. This is the room. Well, not the only room, but this is one of the rooms to do it in, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no judgment in the room. There's no, and if there is, that person's an idiot and just ignore him. But
Yes.
yeah,
We don't get that too often, but don't worry. If we does it gets knocked out of them for quite early on. We go, well, this is not the place for that,
yeah.
And
Oh,
actually,
cool.
it's great as well seeing that sort of seeing people let go of the self-judgment, as we talked about earlier, over
Yeah.
the weeks and the months, and sort of the self-censorship goes. So I mean, I don't know, this is my opinion, but I don't really feel like you can be self-conscious and be an actor.
Oh
I mean,
no.
I'm sure you can. I mean, I'm sure people can, but I mean, that is one thing you have to sort of, be prepared to sort of make. And I think as a teacher, you consistently make an absolute fool of yourself in front of your students all the time. And that's maybe a bit of leading by example.
Yeah.
Being willing to sort of be in the extreme myself. And then be quite critical about it. So again, I've talked about all the fun, but then sit down and be like, and what was that about? And why did we do that? And what was the effect of that? What was the impact of that? And I mean, right now with our firsts, we're doing stuff at the other end of the scale. We're doing stuff where the form is boiled right down to the simplest of actions. So it's a score for 3 people in the space, and they've only got, the only action they're allowed to do is turn around, go, make something of this. That's the only form you're allowed. So that's really stripping it back. And it's the other end of the spectrum, but finding what that's about without having to reach into the extremes of physicality is also part of the process. I think they all have to live in a movement learning environment.
Yeah. It's certainly liberating. Definitely liberating from self-consciousness to fear of the unknown, or that voice in your head going, "You can't do it." It's like, yeah, yes, you can. Yes, you can do it. Just very quickly, what's your favorite animal that you like to work with?
I mean, it is really funny because I find myself saying to the students things like, "Oh, there was an iconic penguin a few years ago," or
Wonderful.
"You should have seen Sophie's chameleon." I
Yeah.
find myself coming home and saying to my partner, "Oh, there was just such a great, whatever today."
Yeah.
I think for me, the actor who is fully committed, it doesn't matter what the animal is. Going back to the example you gave of tarantula, there was a situation a few years ago where a student actually injured their hand. I think they might have broken their hand, and therefore they were doing a tarantula and they couldn't be in the body of the tarantula.
Ouch. Yeah.
Because they couldn't, the weight's all forward, and just physically they were sort of really incapacitated. And they said, "It's fine. I've created a nest, and I'm going to do it all with one hand." And they came to the session and they did all the work, and they sort of did this really interesting. It almost became like a strange new form of puppetry, where the hand was the physicality and the whole body was in the mindset and the thought and the gaze. It's sort of the gaze and the breath and was all here, and then the hand was physical. And I remember thinking, that's fantastic. I'm really excited by that, because it's seeing someone doing the work within the capabilities, not limited, the capabilities of their body. Because of course, not everyone can leap and jump and roll, for lots of reasons. And that's when I'm talking about the transformation. The transformation can be as simple as the gaze. It's not necessarily about someone being able to jump as high as a kangaroo, but it's actually seeing an actor really understand an aspect and commit to that aspect. And sort of, see that through. I'm a bit of a cop-out, sorry. I do remember a very good chameleon from a few years ago. That was a very exciting penguin, like I said. And so this is not the only thing I teach, but I have just been teaching it. It is one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's like you said earlier about, we can say to 5-year-olds, this is work. But could you also say to that 5-year-old, like, one day you're going to come home from work and you're going to go, God, I saw a brilliant penguin today. Or that chameleon, that was off the charts. Or that spider was very believable. And you're being paid to do that. They'll be like, what? They'll be like,
Yeah,
yeah, this is how animal studies
absolutely.
works.
Yeah. And again, how exciting when the students then the penny drops, this is incredibly useful, and they're
Yeah.
doing, a classic text, and they're going, oh my God, I've just realized that bottling this essence down, as you sort of said, bring it down to its condensing it to a place where it's appropriate for the form, the style of the piece I'm in,
Mm.
but it's still relevant. And it can become part of the landscape of the character that I'm, my research into the character, my thinking about the character. When the penny drops, well, that's fun. When it becomes, I think there's a really interesting process that happens often with we start with students and they're doing their movement class and their voice class, whatever, and they're enjoying it all and they're getting stuff out a bit. But when it starts to sort of the bits click together and they realize it all belongs in the same world, and
Mm.
that's really, really good, because they have to bring it together in a way. That's on the individual actor to find out how these parts fit together. But when they do, that's kind of very rewarding to observe. Even just acknowledging the value and the use of different parts, but then even more so when that actually does start to work for them, and you start to see that they're drawing on all these different strands they've encountered, and they're sort of bringing it together into a whole.
Yeah, I think it ties in really nice to Laban's work as well, like the efforts and all that, going to extreme, dabbing, flicking, thrusting, whatever it is, really out there, floating, gliding, and then bringing it all back down in a way. So there's a nice link between animal studies and Laban in a way, going to the extreme and then bringing it all to a condensed state.
Yeah. And I think again, my personal experience of a lot of movement work is that route from the fuller expression of something, and enjoying that, and then finding the appropriate scale that works for you. It is the most. It's hard to turn up the volume. Sort of classic in the director. Directors say, if I've never told anyone it's too much. I often have to tell people it's too little. I know it's a bit of a cliche, because I have also have had to say, well, it's a bit too much to actors. But I think there's something about that. We all have our sort of sense of what feels over the top, and actually it's working out. What's theatrically viable? Are you on camera, or are you in a huge auditorium, and then things need to reach and they need to have a sort of form and a structure a little bit more, which is will read, want a word, realistically.
Mm.
It's just reading across it's just projecting across space. So even that's interesting. Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about realism or naturalism. Like, depends on the arena you're in when you're doing that. Something came to mind before and I forgot actually as well. I was going to say is, I always say to my students, you've got to have lots of physical experiences. So when they're doing animal studies and they're going butterfly, I'm like, get on a bike and freewheel down a hill.
Yeah.
When was the last time you went to a swimming pool? But just generally be collectors of physical experiences. Go out there and encounter safely as many physical experiences as you can, because your job is to sort of channel those in your work, and actually, ideally, let's leave less to the imagination, and let's actually have encountered these things, again, safely and appropriately, just to make that really clear.
Yeah, of
But
course.
if you can encounter them for real, then you're drawing on memory and using those experiences, rather than having to sort of imagine what it would feel like to freewheel down a hill, and therefore trying to then imagine how that would feel like to fly. That's sort of like, there's too many layers. It's possible, but I feel like it makes it unnecessarily hard work. So I'm always, my homework is always, go and dance in the rain, or go
Yeah.
bike down a hill kind of homework. But it's like, collect experiences. I can't remember why I was thinking that, but it was kind of back a few thoughts ago when we were talking about animal studies, I think.
Yeah, don't worry, it'll come back. It'll come back. I think one thing that you mentioned there is, whether you're in the theatre and you're going to the back of the auditorium, or whether it's just on camera. I think that's a really interesting. So, say if you've got a close up, like a really quite extreme close up, yeah, you've got to communicate all these emotions, all these feelings that your character's going through. But of course, on camera, it's a, like you say, we keep coming back to this word condense. It's a much more condensed, laid, stripped back experience thing that you do, rather than, being out there and boisterous and in the theatre because you have to reach the back of the auditorium. So what would be like something that, say if someone was on camera, they got this close up and they come to you and they say, how do I communicate all this emotion without really moving my face?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that screen acting is probably the area I'm least knowledgeable about.
Okay.
But I think what's interesting anyway is something I often talk to students about, or actors about rather. I'm going back to students, that's my main area of work, but where in the body an emotion might be located. Is it a punch in the gut? Is it, here? But then also letting that emotion then wash through the body, wash through your physical experience.
Yeah.
And obviously that includes the face and the eye. And there is interesting, actually, often with movement work, you get a little bit of the sort of, it gets cut off here.
Yeah.
But you get like they either physicalize really great and then the face is sort of cut out the picture, or the opposite. There's lots of thought and feeling going on behind the eyes, but the body's a bit locked up. So a lot of my work, actually, I do think is to kind of put those things together to get them comfortable in their bodies, but then connect the thought and the action. But then also, as I mentioned, the action connecting to the thought, going back to that earlier comment, that sort of action theatre and that reciprocal dialogue. And I think that, a lot of, again, we'll talk about condensing, we do practices where we've gone from the extremes, then we actually do bring it right down and we have them come still in the body, think the thought, look around the space, have that thought behind the eyes, bring that, even the eyes to stillness, have that thought in the breath, have that feeling in the breath. So it's something, again, it's training that process. So I think if someone said that to me, I would probably say, figure out where that thought or emotion is located in the body, let that wash through the body, involve the face.
Yeah.
And if in doubt, physicalize the whole thing for yourself in a separate space, work it out sort of in the big, and then just feel that sort of, condensing, it's a great word, I'm going to use it again, but feel that condensing. And again, maybe go through that process of incorporating everything, bring the face into the physical work you're doing so you're not leaving it behind. I say the face, it's like I'm sort of pulling faces, but I think we know what I mean. Let the thought wash up to here as well as just down to the feet.
Yeah.
And then just, and then work on that condensing, and then to just know that the sort of the way you want to bring it back to it is the part that's going to be visible. But that's a really interesting process because I think that I literally had a student the other day say, how do I involve my face as part of the body? And I said, it is. It already is.
It's already there, mate. It's already
in a
there.
way, if you overthink it, it's sort of like when you say a word too many times and it loses all meaning. There's an element here sometimes when students are in training is they lose sight of it because we get worse before we get better. We lose all our connection to instinct and impulse because we're sort of trying to do all the stuff. And actually, you have to trust that over time we'll get better at that and we'll be able to incorporate the things we know and our instincts and things sort of and our technique together in an effective way.
Yeah. You mentioned there about, again, that example of one of your students saying, how can I, feel that there's a disconnect here in a way. So from the neck down, there's expression, but from the neck up, there's no expression whatsoever. But which of course is not true. But and that's a good tie into sort of like we talk about, like if you're a writer, then you have writer's block, I think, and I think that's the more common example. But I think in terms of like other areas like directing, movement, or anything else, you can have sort of creative block in a way. And I remember asking Rebecca Rini, who's been on the show, if you have creative block or movement block, what's the best way to sort of get around it? And she brilliantly just went, just get up and move. Just get up and move.
And I do know Rebecca actually, and I would absolutely agree. Great practitioner. I'd absolutely just do the thing. This is the equivalent of something like that. I'm like, just think the thoughts. Just think the thoughts. Just think the thoughts and trust and and breathe and all those things. But sort of not do first blindly, but do. And I think actually that's something I've learned from my previous experience in dance, and particularly with contemporary dance and the making process that you find in that, which is often that sort of you go in with a concept and you dig into that concept through doing, sort of through improvisation scores and things, and you find out what you're making a piece about through that process. At least that was my creative process as a choreographer, and I think it's not uncommon at least in the UK, as a method.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually something I still do as a movement director, which is obviously, we know what this scene is, we know what we're trying to do with this moment, but let's still sort of do first, and through doing, uncover, and then through discussion and through reflection, like uncover what it is we're already doing. And actually tying back to the action and theatre work again, do first and then notice, notice how you're doing something and then let that inform what you do next. So sort of micro, macro, and then, even bigger scale. I think it's a good tip. Get
Yeah.
up and move.
Just get up, move, and just keep working at it.
Yeah.
I suppose like another word that's drilled in what I found at GSA was relaxation.
Yeah.
You've got to find the relaxation in everything that you do. And we did a lot of work with Grania, who does a lot of work with Michael Chekhov, the feeling of ease, and just ultimately just whatever you're doing, whether you're going extreme or you're very, very small, just relax. Everything you do is with complete ease. And I've just got an image in my head now saying, just sort of mildly going back to your animal studies thing, or if you've had a show where a character or an actor and actress has just gone, they have to do this huge thing, and maybe they have to do this big, bold expression. And and you think, oh my God, they're being really tense and they're pushing all this emotion out. When actually, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you strike me as someone who would say, even when you're going within these big movements, you're still relaxed and you're still finding that ease, even though you're giving it a lot, you're actually still relaxed, which is quite a nice antithesis in a
Yeah.
way. Would I be correct?
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. And I think that, again, that's a practical training. We can train how to find an engaged body that's a relaxed body. And we can train that through practical exercises. But it's also an imaginative piece. Absolutely. I was thinking, I was in a rehearsal process with the brilliant Jack Bessel recently, and she said to a bunch of actors, just remember the characters believe what they're saying. And I remember thinking, like, it sounds obvious, but like, yes. I mean, in this case, they also did. They do believe what they're saying. And therefore, we have to believe what we're saying. And it was interesting because that day in animal studies, going back to that again, I'd said to someone, just remember the animal finds it easy. Just remember the chameleon or whatever, I keep going to chameleon, finds it easy. So can you just believe, again, this sounds very reductive, but can you believe it's easy? Can you just decide to make this easy and like let it be so? And obviously that's reductive and a bit simplistic. And again, one of the things that possibly you say as a teacher and the students go, oh. But I also think there's something about the imaginative world of going, I'm going to just decide that my character, that the body I have as this character finds this activity is well suited to the activity it's doing. A monkey is designed to swing through trees, so decide it's easy. And so there's imaginative work there. And as well, of course, there's just some practical training about how do we engage and be relaxed. And obviously sometimes we get tension, which is not helpful, but also we can get relaxation to the point where someone's almost sort of like passive or floppy. So how do we find an appropriate engagement in the body? I guess I don't know much about voice, but I guess it's similar to how do you support projection. You don't need to be pushing, but you do need to be able to support that vocal energy. So these are things we train, and some people find it easier than others. There are people whose tendency is to overwork, and there are people whose tendency is to underwork in the sense of they're trying to do it right, and therefore they're not being lazy. They're sort of, their body is underworking because they're trying to find the relaxation. So it takes time. It really does take time, and I think it's also a journey that's kind of lifelong because your body changes over time and with different lots of lifestyle factors and different things. So what ease and efficiency, and I mean, I think for me, I guess I love the word relaxation, but even more so I love sort of ease and efficiency, because I think relaxation can sometimes, I find in younger students, can be a bit misunderstood, and they think it means just being completely relaxed. And I'm going, well, no, it's ease. So you could be sprinting and be easeful. You can be engaged and easeful. So I don't know if easeful is even a word, but that's the word that I use. Like, let it be easy. And if in doubt, do some self-massage, do some breathing, take some time, do a roll down, dance it out, do a 5 rhythms wave, shake out the tension, and go again.
I feel like there was one time because Chris Palmer, who's at GSA as well. There was one time where she got us all in the room. I'm not sure if she picked up on us being tense or something like that. I'm not sure, but I think she wanted us all just to be just relax with, because she's a voice teacher. You know, I wanted all of us to be completely relaxed. So she said, all right, okay, I'm going to turn out all the lights. I'm going to close all the curtains. I'm going to play some sea music. So the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. And I just want all of you just to lie on the floor and just take it all in. And that's all we're going to do. And he woke up, just well, woke up, yeah, a few of us actually fell asleep. But we just sort of did it for a good 20 minutes. And then she opened the curtains again and be like, ah! There's a light coming into the room. But we all got up and just felt, well, for me especially, just felt completely and utterly, okay, like what, like almost that voice going, what next? What do you have for me now? In a way, is that part of your practice as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a sign of, a good teacher and also a good creative, actually. Sometimes you go into a room and you go, something, there's something that needs addressing, where that's, verbally, but also through doing. And absolutely, I think, most of my classes start with some kind of lying, standing, or sitting and breathing and noticing. And that might be in pairs and back to back, or, I think that's a really important part of the work, or just alone. Maybe that's hands-on, maybe that's just in space. Breathing and noticing. You can't work if you're not aware. So you have to start from awareness, and you can't be aware if your brain is busy spinning all the other plates. And actually at the other end, again, not at the expense of sounding like I only think bigger is better. Sometimes it's the other end. Sometimes I put on a really good track, really good trap music, and we turn the lights out. And I say, let's have a 10-minute rave. And let's just like get it all out, shouting and screaming. I guess maybe a bit of a Five Rhythms chaos moment or whatever. Let's do that. And then also have the bit afterwards of the, not just that straight into work, but that, and release it. Because there is the research that shows that, if we want to complete the stress cycle in the body, we need to move the stress through, and we have to sort of, for want of a better word, sweat it out, getting it out the body. And then then the next phase is the listening to the sea music and then we're ready to work. So working on Journey's End, which is a play I did at GSA in the autumn, that's a heavy text.
Yeah.
And it's heavy text, and it's a difficult text. It's quite a long play, it's dealing with difficult subject matter. And I remember going in just to do a session, and I was like, I think we need to put some like waltzy music on and have like a 5-minute dance, because everyone just needs to loosen up. There's lots of tension. There's lots of people holding and doing that. There wasn't much movement in the piece in terms of heightened physicality or complex staging. It was quite there was a lot of stillness and a lot of space, and therefore people were locking up. So actually we needed just to kind of like get our flow on. And I remember the actor saying to me, God, I really needed that. Like I needed in this 6-week process 5 minutes of just finding also again, like finding qualities of weight and swing and release, which we can now bring back into our work with stillness, and not kind of atrophy or kind of tense in that stillness.
Yeah. Just a very quick aside. I want to get on to your work with productions as well. You mentioned Journey's End there, which I'd really love to delve into. But there's another teacher who's been on the show a couple of times, Rose Ryan, who has, I think she's left GSA now, I think. Yeah. Anyway, hi Rose, hope you're okay. But I remember one thing she told us, and I think she mentioned in one of the episodes that we did, was that she has heard people say, like, if you're having a bad day before class, just leave it all out there, come in and be professional. But she said, no, fuck that. I want you to bring everything in. If you're not feeling shitty that morning, bring in the fact you're feeling shitty, and then we can sort of look at it and go, and as you said there, if you can sense that the room's not happy, we'll be like, okay, right, before we do anything, let's just put on some rave music, get it all out, sweat out your system, and then pick yourselves up and be like, right, you ready to work now? Yeah. And like you said, that student said, oh, I needed that.
Yeah.
Now I've got so much more in my head. So where do you stand on that?
I mean, we're whole human beings. We're whole human beings. I mean, obviously there's something we're also training students in, which is learning to have healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And that is a process. We all have to learn about how you might have stuff going on in your life, and how do you, I'm not saying leave it at the door, don't bring it in, but more like, what parts of myself do I want to share in this environment? Which is not that we hide parts of ourselves, but we maybe share in ways that doesn't make us vulnerable. More vulnerable. So it's that kind of, there is a dialogue we have to have with students. I think, again, doing a lot of the sort of undergraduate teaching, it's that sort of that journey of saying to them, you're a whole human being. If you've got stuff going on, I'm here with you. I'm on board with that. Of course, it's part of your experience. And also, how much of that do you want to have present in this space? But I think the answer is not leave it at the door. The answer is maybe more sort of the analogy Jasmine uses, you can put it to the side and you can collect it at the end. It will still be there for you.
Mm.
So it's not that you're denying that part of yourself. You're just sort of going, okay, that's not as useful right now for me because I want to do my scene work or whatever. So I'm just going to sort of put that to the side of the room. I can keep an eye on it. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting thing you get from sort of sports psychology, which a practitioner called Kyle Eccles shared with me. And he was saying that he sort of has like, what's your objective and what's going to prevent you achieving that? And that's quite a sort of didactic way of looking at it. And again, that maybe sounds a little bit harsh, but I think there's a kinder, more holistic way of doing that, which is I want to fully engage. And what's going to prevent me is these distractions. So what do I want to do about that? It doesn't mean I have to cut them off, but what do I want to do about that? So I'm not sort of battling the entire session with this stuff in my mind, which is not productive for you or anybody, but I'm also not denying my life and I'm, the other stuff, because you're still a whole human. So yeah, I think it's an interesting line. It's one that I think with students, we do have to guide them through kind of figuring out what's right for them, what they want to share, that they don't overshare and feel vulnerable as well.
Yeah, of course.
Or what they might share with me as their personal tutor, and what they might want to share with me as their movement tutor, because they might have different frames. So yeah, I'm on board, absolutely, and I also think that's an interesting process to navigate. That's my thoughts.
Brilliant. So let's jump into your work. So the other end of the bow, sort of taking the break from sort of animal studies in a way, but I'm sure this might. It all has a way of coming back to it actually. So if we do. Keep mentioning it. But you're welcome on sort of shows specifically. So I know you've done quite a few shows with GSA. You've done a lot of work with the British Youth Music Theatre and all that kind of thing, working with young performers, maybe 14, 15, 16 years old. But if we were to just look through the GSA lens just on this occasion, so I know you've done Journey's End, which you mentioned there. You've done The Wolves, She Kills Monsters, Midsummer Night's Dream. You've done all kinds of shows, whether from Elizabethan text to contemporary stuff as well, all across history. So if we were to start right at the beginning of a production, take Journey's End being the example, most recent one, how does it start for you? You and your movement brain. How does it start that journey of working on a show?
Well, it's interesting working within a school context because these are almost always students that I know well.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting thing there because that moment of discovery of a cast, of meeting the cast, of maybe creating that company is not less necessary, maybe. I don't know, because there's a sort of there's I already have an experience of them and their work, and they know me and they know my practice, and they know each other. So there's an interesting thing there about specifically working within a school environment, I think. So often it's the director who's the newbie who's coming and going, I don't know these people. That's quite an interesting thing because often I think sometimes I am the person who may be a connection point between that freelance director and the school, whether that's sort of almost like welcome to our house, and also just how do you navigate these systems.
Yeah.
Something interesting there about being that sort of maybe that halfway house between the students and the director in those early days, about being that person who can sit in the middle and understands and knows both. Taking Journey's End as an example, which I work with Jack Bradfield, who's a brilliant director. He is incredibly clear on his vision. Like I've worked with him a couple of times, and he's someone who goes. What I love about working with him is he really talks me through the world of the piece. He really has a vision for the world of the piece, and he doesn't sort of share the information that's relevant to movement with me. He shares everything that he thinks is interesting and exciting. He gets excited about the work and wants to share all that with you. So reading the text and having those conversations and really understanding the world that he wants to create and feeding into that, sort of saying, well, what about this? What about that? And then I think there's always a really interesting process where we all decide what we think we're going to do, what the role of movement is. And then about a week in, I'm like, it's really not that, it's something completely different. So for example, with Journey's End, we thought it was all about this fact that there's a stripped back set, there's no props at all, just chalk. And they drew the landscape of the piece with chalk on the floor. So I thought, it'll be about the stillness and the space and the ease in that stillness. And it was that. But actually, it became a lot about going, the audience cannot see the world, literally the environment. So the actors need to be seeing it for us. and we need to figure out if there's a chalk line on the floor and it's a threshold, how does an actor navigate the fact that there is now this threshold and there's a public space and a private space? That's someone's room. This is the communal area. And how do we just find ways to engage with that idea? And of course, in a show like Journey's End, a piece like Journey's End, there's no set pieces. There actually was one set piece we put in, but there's no, this is about the actors having a facility with the language of that so they can then do their work. We're not sort of saying, it's not about blocking. It's about giving them space to understand the rules of engagement.
Yeah.
So that play, for example, really became about me helping the director and the actors understand and sort of engage effectively in the body with the rules of the world.
Yeah.
So it was an unexpected process. And it was interesting because it was almost like, I remember going into a run and feeling like everything feels a bit vague and a bit confused. Just first run vibes, and everyone's a little bit confused why it's not working, sort of thing. And it was like, it's because we actually don't know where we're standing. We don't know the rules of this. And actually, once we clarify that, sort of almost like that foundation, it felt a bit like when you go to like an archaeological dig and you can sort of see the bones of the buildings. It's like we need to be able to see the bones of the buildings. And even when we're not in that space, we need to kind of know that that's a separate space from this. And that space belongs to this important person. That space belongs to this person who's considered to be less important, and who can hear what, where are the walls porous, and therefore these two actors who are on stage simultaneously can hear each other, and where do they not hear each other? And that's not about them doing anything, it's about them understanding those rules. And that was super enjoyable, actually, because it really spoke to my kind of maybe slightly geeky interest in sort of finding the rules. I sort of enjoyed that. And then also, of course, breaking the rules, because then you go, actually, it's no longer useful. I don't know, they've walked all over the chalk and the chalk starts to break down. So when do we decide that those rules dissolve? And that's a dramaturgical choice. And what I loved about, again, with that piece working with Jack is that it was a chance to really, through that process, we then had to have those sort of dramaturgical conversations, really, which I really enjoyed being part of, which is a movement director you can be involved in completely, but sometimes you're not, depending on, especially in a school environment where you've got little snippets of time to do movement around your teaching. Be able to sort of have the luxury of sitting there and really being able to go, well, what does it mean if that wall dissolves there? And what does it mean if he can't hear him? What does that tell us? Not just about that moment, but about all the moments before and after. And that was just really exciting.
Yeah. I never heard it being described like that before. That's really just fascinating, just all the intricacies of how movement can translate between, even to the act of listening, and how it ties into the voice and everything. Of course, everything ties together, about how within the context, how it all comes together in a way. And just a quick aside, really, Journey's End is a play. If anyone who doesn't know, it's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful play by R.C. Sheriff. It's all about the experience of the lads in the trenches during the First World War. Everything from how they're going to attack the enemy, morale being low, people trying to run. It's an absolutely beautiful play, and I encourage anyone to read it. And if there's a production, go and see it. And there's a film of it as well. It's on Amazon, so you might have to pay for it, but honestly, it's some of the best money you'll spend. It's a and so in terms of where I'm sort of going with this, really, is you've got this huge bed of historical context to this play because it's all about the First World War, and there's book after book after book after book, and film and TV series after film after TV series made about this. There's so much to it. So what was the process like with you and was it Jack, the director that you worked with?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did sort of you, Jack, and the rest of the creative team sort of set about going your own sort of unique, not only your own unique take on the play, your own unique production, but your own way of sort of allowing the historical context to help influence how you worked on this thing?
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation, isn't there, anyway, about the sort of nature of restaging and repertoire. And I mean, there's like a wider philosophical conversation, obviously, isn't there, about how do you
Yeah.
engage with things that
Yeah.
have lives before. So the decision to sort of strip it all back on a practical level was made before I was involved. So that was interesting. That came to me as this is a decision that's been made.
Mm.
That's purely a logistical thing. That was made before I was on board. And I remember thinking, that's cool. And also that's really hard because it's a play that's
Yeah.
all about people talking about the thing that they're not really they're talking about the weather and marmalades. They don't have to talk about the fact that they're going to go over the trenches, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a play all about business, and therefore there's nothing to have business with. And I think it was quite a brave choice, therefore, of the director, because in some ways it would have been much easier to give the actors lots of stuff, to work with, because I'm not saying that would have been was a bad choice of good, but I think it would have been easier for the actors. It was quite confronting to be like, oh no, it's you on a stage alone with a piece of chalk for for a very long play.
Yeah.
And there are some characters who barely leave. In our production, Mason doesn't leave the stage. I don't think, and Stanhope barely leaves the stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's written into the script as such.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, that it's quite confronting, and it's interesting because the initial discoveries are often quite exciting because you're going, oh, this is really great because we can really dig into the text, look at the text fresh, and then we can sort of have fun with exploring the possibilities of, well, if there's a something someone says have a seat, really practically someone says have a seat, how do we do that thing? And then it gets very frustrating because you go, we've made our life really hard, and and then it gets exciting again. I think there is something always, of course, about the weight of staging a work that's well known, established, has had great productions. But I think there's something really lovely about doing those with student actors, actually, partly, which is probably a bit of a cop-out for your question, so I don't have a wider answer, but because often they are discovering it for the first time.
Yeah.
And it is their first ever version of this thing. And they maybe not have seen a version of that thing. And they do their due diligence, they do their research, but I think there's something really amazing about, and forgive me if I've already said this, I think I may have said it to you before we started recording, I may have said it now, but that amazing thing of like the maturity of the actor's process to do their due diligence, but also the naivety of like discovering it for the first time.
Yeah.
And because they're discovering it for the first time, we get to discover it for the first time too. I don't know if that's a cop-out of an answer.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No, it's one thing that I remember. I remember speaking to David Grinley, who actually directed it in the West End and on Broadway, and he talked about how just so many things, just the communication between the characters, especially in a play like this. The stakes are high the whole time because within, I don't know how far it was between the trenches, but within just a run is the difference between life and death, between this short little patch that they call no man's land. And and one scene in particular sticks out and always stays with me actually in the play is, I can't remember the character's names. You'll have to remind me. In Act Two, where one of the officers goes to, I think it's Relay, or I could be. Anyway, I'm not going to guess. I'm probably going to get it wrong. He goes to the captain's office, and he goes, "I'm really ill. This neuralgia of mine. It's just not going away, is it?" And the captain goes, "Yeah, well, I've had it as well this whole time." And you can see the officers going, "That wasn't the answer I wanted." Yeah, and then this entanglement comes in, and he threatened. The officer says to him, "Well, one thing that you can do is that you can either stay here and do your job, or you walk out that door, and something's going to happen. And what's going to happen is, say I'm just cleaning my gun, and accidentally the gun goes off, and it hits you in the back of the head. Complete accident. Everyone will believe me. In other words, you'll be shot for deserting if you continue with this charade." And where I'm going with this is, this scene is driven by a need to escape. It's fear. Fear is the big word, I think. Someone who's desperately wants to get out. And so when you read that, when you played that scene, obviously I missed the production, unfortunately, but that scene in particular, when you worked with the actors, how did you sort of go about identifying like the fear? Where do they store the fear in their
that's
bodies?
really interesting. I mean, I'm so sorry, again, for want of a better word, but feeling like we keep going back to our old answers. There's something, isn't there, about the way that in that play as well, everything is buttoned up. It's not even condensed. Everything is sort of encased in the conventions of the time and concepts of masculinity and honor and those kind of things. I mean, that's a really interesting moment to talk about, because I think the actor playing Stanhope initially was sort of thinking this person is either mad or a bit of a villain in that moment. We're going, actually, is he, or is he someone who's doing, quotes, the honorable thing, in
Mm.
that moment. I mean, that's not for me to dictate. That's the director, the actor to have those conversations.
Yeah, of
I
course.
like to chip in, but I'm always a bit like, it's not really my area, but I have my own
No,
thoughts.
but chip in, Rachel, please.
But I think it's really interesting because it's something about the fact that, for that moment, I weirdly, now you've said that, I know exactly the scene you mean, and I've had a complete blank what the other character is called. I've got
Yeah.
every other character in the play in my head and not that one. I can see the actor doing it and I can't think what he's called.
Yeah. Oh, but yeah, my
Um,
mind's gone blank. I think it's Relay and Stanhope, I think.
yeah, so I think no, because Riley is the young lad, so it'll come to me. But
Yeah, it'll come to me as well. Yeah.
everything's been buttoned, and I said everyone's talking about their gardens back home, so in order to not talk about what they really are thinking, and then actually you have a moment when this character is sort of slightly the cocoon slightly breaks, and he's coming out a little bit from that. So that was for me the interesting conversation with the actor was sort of like you've actually everyone is buttoned up and you've sort of that cocoon is just slightly split and the inner,
Mm.
but actually everyone's got that same inner world. Everyone's terrified through that play. In my opinion, in different ways, maybe
Oh,
not,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but, and again, and that's sort of it's encased in the uniform, and it actually for the actor sort of allowing a little bit of that inner world out, um, and then being met by someone who is it's interesting because I don't know if I mean this is is Stanhope in that moment buttoned up or is actually when almost like he takes his cocoon off but his whole self is less it's a different it's it's the sort of almost the inner core that's actually quite calm and quite composed sort of underneath all the layers there's a sort of the essence of him. So there's something for me about in those moments talking about the layers and the sort of the duality and I mean the duos the qualities of I think going back to the Laban work but the sort of the qualities of the inner and the outer and when they might when the cracks might appear,
Mm.
facades we put up because I think that whole play is a lot about talking about what is the facade and what is the inside. And actually, interestingly, this decision to strip the setback, it kind of means that there's no facade, there's an empty space, there's no, there's nothing there that tells us we're in the First World War
Mm.
at all. It's in the text. So actually, we come back to that first thing. It's in the text, which is sort of interesting. It's like leaning into that rather than leaning into maybe
No,
concepts around that, if that
no,
makes sense.
no, it's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've got the names. Is it Hibbert?
Yes, it's Hibbert. There you go.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
Hibbert and Stanhope. Yes,
Yeah.
well done.
Just came into my head now because
Well
no,
done.
yeah, thanks. No, the reason why I remember it so much because I remember for A levels I did drama A level and we had to do monologue or duologue exams, so you could pick one of the two. I remember two of the guys did that scene, and
Mm.
also at the time I was a bit, wasn't aware of plays and drama school that kind of thing. But I just loved acting really for all sorts of reasons. But I remember seeing that, hearing that scene for the first time, thinking, "Wow, that writing is it's incredible." And that scene as well, and it's funny you mentioned about like, is Stanhope doing the honorable thing or is he being a monster? I think you can see both sides. But say if it was set in the First World War, that was practice. If a soldier deserted,
Yeah.
he was killed, and he was sent, and a letter was sent to his family saying, "Your son was killed because he threatened to run away, and unfortunately, he's now been labeled a coward." And
Yeah.
it's it's barbaric. I mean, as we speak now in 2024, it's barbaric, but at the time, it's
The
that was
norm. And
the
again,
norm.
interestingly,
Yeah,
doing it with actors who are similar. I mean, not all of them, because there are older characters in that, but a lot of them are sort of similar to the age of the characters themselves. And, Stanhope is supposed to be kind of world weary at 20 something,
yeah,
because of what he's seen and because of what he's gone through.
yeah, yeah.
A few years ago for BYMT, I did a version of The Dark Tower. And it's really interesting because the person who, which is sort of it was a reinterpretation of the Robert Browning poem. And it has a soldier in it, and the actor who played the soldier is 16 and dies at the end. And you think, well, actually, 16-year-olds, conscription 16-year-olds did used to go to war,
Yeah.
and in some cultures and countries still do. And now we think of that as a child, but that would have been considered in some ways and times an adult. Something very poignant, I think, actually, about someone staging a work with younger people when that's appropriate. And obviously, of course, sometimes it's hard for them to play the older characters, but something very poignant about watching a young person who is possibly the age that we now would consider inappropriate engaging in those kind of activities where you think, that's awful. That's
Yeah.
just a child.
I think the conscription age was 16, I think, at the time. Yeah, so it was 16 to 45, if my history if serves me correctly. So anyone, yeah, and that's again, God, you're full of interesting insights, Rachel. You really are. It's seeing someone of that age, being torn away from home, shoved in a uniform, and just gone, all right, go kill some Germans.
Yeah.
What? What? No, yeah, go on, off you go. Oh, and by the way, if you try and run home, we'll kill you.
Yeah, it's actually terrifying. I'm sort of laughing
Yeah,
and smiling, but it's absolutely. I think what I'm smiling at is the sort of recognition of how kind of rich and interesting those plays still are. I mean, it was at the time, but because it does make you confront some of those really difficult questions about what we think is appropriate and what is honor and responsibility and kindness
yeah,
in, what is ethics at sort of the end of the world in a way,
yeah, yeah, in a way, yeah. But
Um,
just very quickly, I mean, I sadly, like I said, I didn't manage to catch it, unfortunately, but I saw some of the production images, and we've talked about the chalk and everything. What was the symbolism of the chalk exactly? Why was that used?
well, it was more to do with the fact that the space is constructed through the piece. So rather than having a space that we inhabit, the space is built through the work. So as people come in, they delineate their zones. And then, of course, as the piece continues, those chalk, I mean, the map of the no man's land is drawn on the floor, the map of the trenches. So it's all it's being conjured for the audience in real time as the characters discover it. They choose their room and then they create their room. That was a bit of bad acting from me there, showing you how they choose a room and then create the room,
So
but you get
silly,
what I
so
mean.
silly.
And then so I feel like a BBC, a Blue TP presenter, sort of doing my thing. But they're doing all of that, and then they then it gets destroyed. So you then also see as the sort of mental state of Stanhope particularly breaks down,
Yeah.
you sort of see how everything's smeared and nothing's legible anymore. So it becomes sort of, I guess it becomes a sort of metaphor for the state of mind as they construct order, and then that order is destroyed around them by them,
Mm.
and sort of almost inadvertently. And by the end of the piece, we've just got a complete mess, just chalk everywhere, no sense of clarity. And actually, in some ways, it's interesting because we've had this whole sort of first act where you're very clear, like that's a table, that's chairs, that's a dugout, that's Mason's area, that's this kitchen. And then by the end, it's all gone. But what you then become aware of then is the vast open space
Mm.
of just Stanhope or Raleigh alone in this space. So it sort of allows you to sort of hone in on the almost the domestic nature of some of those scenes, and then sort of later on pull back and sort of see it, almost the abstract quality of that staging ebbs in and out of our focus. That was my experience. I mean, it's hard sometimes, isn't it, also when you think afterwards about why something was done, because in a way it gets clouded or altered by what it became.
Mm.
And I do think that piece was a discovery process for all of us. Completely different to the other plays I was working on at the time, but it was probably the most sort of, we're discovering live what it means to go, what if we create the space live? What if we dissolve the space live?
Yeah.
What does that offer? And until you actually see it in tech and you see stage covered in chalk, you don't really know what everyone's miming writing on the walls, and you're thinking, I really hope this works.
If you're in tech, you'd be like, okay, come on, this works, this works. It's a little late now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, it looks like it very much did, and yeah, hopefully that play comes back again, and I'd love to see it. Love to see it. It's a beautiful, beautiful play. I can't begin to describe how brilliant it is, guys. Honestly, just check it out. Um, Honestly, I've still got so many more questions for you, Rachel, about Journey's End and everything. I know we're slightly pushed for time, so I'm gonna have to hold Journey's End for now. But I'd love to have you. I'd love to have you back. I've still got so many more questions about that and your work with the British Youth Music Theatre and just all kinds of things. And still got more questions. Still got animal studies in my head as well. It's not going to leave me. So still plenty of stuff left to talk about. Unfortunately, we won't get to it today, but we'll have to do this again and get it all in because I find you incredibly fascinating and your work is inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying that. I'm not just saying that. So it's good. So we'll just finish off with just a few more questions and then we'll can reconvene at another time. So the first one really is what excites you the most about movement?
I have two answers. Is that allowed?
Of course it is.
Okay. So two very different answers. So purely as a creative, as a movement director for hire, if you see what I mean, not literally for hire. Well, also if someone does want to hire me, that's fine.
That's a
I
bonus.
yeah, I really enjoy, and I think this comes from having come through dance and ended up in movement. I really enjoy pieces where I get to create a really physical, choreographed language for a piece. She Kills Monsters, which was happening simultaneously with Journey's End, which we'll maybe talk about another time.
Yeah.
The World of Dungeons and Dragons, that was probably one of my highlights of my time at GSA, having waxed lyrical about Journey's End. But She Kills Monsters was amazing because it allowed me to let loose that sort of maybe the choreographic part of my brain that and sort of create a sort of a really satisfying language and rules and logic, and also moments of heightened sort of physical beauty, which feels like it brings together all the things I've ever done in a really enjoyable way. So that's my creative answer. I think more than that, though, it's the amazing moment when an actor, whether that's a student, a professional, a young person, whatever, sort of, which is why probably deep at heart I really am a teacher, not a movement director. So, I think really my passion is with that training process, is because it's when someone discovers that movement is a joy and not a chore. And that can be gentle stretching. It can be that they discover rolling around and breathing. It can also be that they discover a martial art or an extreme sport or whatever. But it's that moment of, and it can happen in any, it can happen in all kinds of places. It can happen in content improvisation or animal studies or a Laban class or a movement fundamentals. Or I do a technique called Gaga, which is a dance technique, a little bit of Gaga, not huge amounts. I don't know lots about it, but I know a little bit. And just seeing someone kind of go, oh, I didn't know my body could do that. I didn't know it could, or rather, I didn't know my body could feel like that when I moved. That's really the thing, because it doesn't matter what they're doing. It's great if it's also beautiful, but actually beauty often comes from someone being fully invested and enjoying the moment. And that's why I like teaching, I think, because it can come in a production, it can come in a third year suddenly being like, oh my God, I didn't know that we could do a show like She Kills Monsters and pull it off, which was an amazing achievement for people who, it was almost a dance show, as much dance. Someone said to me, it's more choreography than a musical. And I was like, yes, and these are actors who haven't had that specific training. So what an incredible achievement. But it can also come in a first year doing a roll down and being like, oh, that felt easy for the first time. I suddenly felt what it feels like to be relaxed as I engaged myself, or I just took some deep breaths and I actually really understood what I was doing in that moment. And some students verbalize that and they say to you, that was the moment. Sometimes you just see it, you go, oh, something's changed. What is it that's changed? So that's my answer.
Yeah, brilliant. Honestly, you've really opened my eyes to movement and just in a completely different way. And how movement has just different relationships with different people and how people talk about it is so different. And I was thinking about the show today, and the titles might be the same. So our movement, so our movement. And I was thinking about how much more can you talk about movement? But you've just completely shown me that you talk to different people about different things about movement, and it's got so much more to it and everything. So this has been amazing to hear all that. So which one's next? Oh yeah, okay. So what do you think movement can do that words can't?
Oh, everything. No, I'm biased. I think that we know that the body communicates. We know that. We know that we understand the body. We read the body in a way that movement is extra textual. It's beyond text. And something I think interesting in dance scholarship, people try and use textual sort of analogies to talk about the body. And I kind of, part of me goes, yes, and also it captures something beyond. I
Yeah.
think it communicates in a level that it connects and communicates at a level that words can, but it goes beyond that. And I feel like sometimes when I try and talk about movement, it's a bit like when you try and talk about poetry. Like if you look at it too directly, it kind of goes away. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like that with movement. It's like, again, you go back to the first thing, you know it when you see it, you know it when you feel it, which feels like a cop out, but I think it's because it's so personal, it's so unique. It brings people together. And I'm just as passionate about community practice as professional practice in this. And I think it it tells stories in a way that words, I mean, for me, the words support the body.
Yeah.
It has to be that way around. So I feel that's an answer I need to think a bit more. But I think movement is the core of everything, the beginning and the end. And now I feel like I'm trying to make my own poem live on a podcast, but I hope that gets somewhere.
Of course it will. No, well, we'll save that for next time. Save that for next time. So just final two questions for you today, Rachel. First one is, what would you say was a bit of advice you wish you heard when you were starting out?
I wish I had known more about the ways that my skill in specifically dance training could be applicable. I wish I'd known that there was more out there. I wish I'd found movement and the acting community since. I wish someone had told me more about what was possible with my skills.
Yeah.
But also, actually, I was given a very good piece of advice by someone who said, I was saying, well, I've got a couple of dates, but it's not really a tour for this piece. And they said, you don't have to wait for someone to tell you it's a tour to say it's a tour. Like, you don't have to wait for someone to give you the job title. And I do think, of course, we have to earn our job titles in the sense we have to earn them through expertise. We can't just slap the title on and go off and do them, particularly when we're talking about things like, I don't know, intimacy direction or fight coordination, or those things that require, fight direction that require actual specific training, safety training. But there is a thing about, like, you can start and you don't have to wait for someone to give you permission to start. And actually, that's learning from the dance world, which is it's an entire industry of fringe. Everything is fringe in contemporary dance, and so therefore, no one put me in a piece, so I started making my own.
Exactly.
That sort of thing. Like, you have to you start, and then through that you build skills and knowledge and experience and connections and all those things. But you don't have to wait for someone to give you a job or an opportunity. You can, and I realize it's a very privileged thing to say because I'm sort of already thinking about all the complexities that make it difficult for lots of people to do that. But you can just start and claim that through doing it. Again, what Rebecca said, just get up and move.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, for that. Just get up and move, mate. Just get up and move. But no, it's very true. It's very true. And finally, today, until next time, what would you say was an experience or experiences you've had in your career up to this point in time that you're never ever going to forget?
Oh. I actually think I'm going to go back to She Kills Monsters, which was the show we did in the autumn.
Yeah.
Which was a great show, directed by Ebe Bamboy and cast of third years. And some of those third years I taught since foundation.
Wow.
So I taught on Zoom with masks in the studio. We did all that. I was their movement teacher in their bedrooms, trying desperately to make it work. And I think they nailed it, absolutely, that cast. And I think seeing people that I'd worked with over 4 years grow and develop and just kind of absolutely smash it out the park. And I remember that because there's a lift. Actually, I didn't choreograph. The assistant movement director, who's brilliant, choreographed. So I can't even lay claim. But they did this lift in the opening moment, and I thought, like, holy crap! Like, that's amazing. That looks, it's so slick, but it's also so embodied. It's so integrated into the story. Like that image is going to stay with me, and I'm so proud of them. And there's the feeling of seeing people come that far. You think, God, they can come that far in 4 years, and what else might happen in their careers? I think that, I mean, that's a recent one, so maybe it'll be replaced by better ones. But for now, that's probably one of my top moments.
Yeah. Fantastic. Brilliant. Rachel, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
I enjoyed it. I enjoy talking about this stuff. I can talk for hours.
No. Next time we'll have no time constraints and we can do like a Joe Rogan. We'll just keep going and going and going. Yeah, I still have so many more questions for you, but unfortunately we'll have to leave it there for today. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation, and I didn't know I could know any more about movement, but you've opened my eyes to it. There's infinite possibilities in every asset of this business, and I think that's why we both love it so much. And yeah, so thank you for your time today. This has been absolutely incredible. I look forward to having you back. So if you just hang on, I'll finish the recording. I'll say goodbye to you one-to-one. But yeah, wow, fantastic stuff, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast, and I'll be back very, very soon. And again, Rachel, just Thank you so much.
Pleasure.